This is Roger from Showbiz Support, and I will show you Step 5 meal penalties. Now, based on the contract, you may actually have to pay a meal penalty if you violated usually 6 hours without actually giving them a break. To do that, is you just click in here. If it's a non-union, for example, I can click right in here and just say it's non-union. Now, the only state that currently requires this is the state of California. And all you need to do is just click that. Think of this as a mini Magic Pay area, and what it'll do is it looks at the hourly rate and pays the hourly rate. You can do it for other states, though it is negotiable, but the only state that requires a meal penalty currently is the state of California. On the other hand, if I'm doing, say for example, an IATSE contract, they use a scale. So I'm going to use Studio as an example here, and if you ever want to see what they are, you're going to click on MPVs. This is the scale. Literally, it's a particular scale for IATSE, 750, 10, and then 1250 repeating, and those numbers are added together. Stage is 850 plus 11 plus 1350, so essentially it's a dollar bump for each violation period. There's also a basic crafts as well, which is 10, 1250, and 15 repeating. So now if I come back in here, I want to make sure I choose this. Now I also want to make sure I clear the amounts. If I've hit the button here, because remember this is a mini Magic Pay, I want to go ahead and clear that and make sure it's correct. So now if I hit Pay Meals, now I'm paying the appropriate amounts. And if I hit Magic Pay, it updates the totals. Now, say for example, I want to call an NDB, non-deductible breakfast, or a hot meal that is supplied usually before call. Somebody that needs to set up, maybe a camera department needs to set up some equipment. So if I supply a meal, a hot meal, usually a truck that supplies a hot meal, I can actually go ahead and wipe out a meal penalty because of that. So I'm going to clear the amounts. And I'm going to go ahead and, because it's an actual time in our program, and we're going to say the call was at 10, but the camera guys came in at 8. So we're going to take, you're allowed to do 12 minutes. So I'm going to say it's essentially it's 9:45 to 10 o'clock because I'm allowed within 2 hours of call. So there we go. 10, I'm going to put a time in, and that's the end of the NDB. And now when I do that, it's actually wiping out a meal penalty. Notice that. NDDs can also be done by doing something that you can override the program with. So say for example there's an NDD here. We don't actually have an NDD field, but that's okay. The MP is what the program suggests. The units are an override. So I can literally come in here and say NDD, and there we go. Nothing will pay when I hit the button. Notice how it's gone? It's only paying just this one. So let me clear that out. So that's how you deal with an NDD. Say for example you wanted to deal with Grace. Grace is done within 12 minutes for the camera to be able to people's camera to be able to finish off a shot. So they call Grace on set and say, hey, we want to finish a shot so that we can get that time to finish that shot, and then we can take our lunch. So now we'll go to Grace and we'll call our 12-minute Grace here and here. And by the way, in PM, we also have a 30-minute camera wrap Grace, and there's also a 60, which is an unusual one that's mostly used back east for special effects and things like that. So it's usually a very large wrap. All right, so we click that, and now notice how we have eliminated any possible MPs that are in there, and now if I hit the button, no meal pay is being paid, but it's overriding it with those graces I took. So now, one thing that's nice to note about that is when you hit Magic Pay, it'll update the totals, no meal penalties are being paid. And also, when you look at the time card also shows that there is information here why you took a grace or an NDB for that matter. Now, I'm going to clear this out again. Now, there are some other interesting things about the program you should know about is no night premium. Usually people who are on night premium usually don't get a meal penalty, although they can. So turning that off will affect the program here, so if you ever have that trouble, that's probably why. Another thing to take a look at is for people in New York. New York people, we have a treat. The program actually does New York meal penalties. New York meal penalties are different in the fact that what happens with a New York meal penalty is you are paying not only you're paying the scale. Usually for features it's 2, for TV it's 3. What happens is you pay these first 3 scale rates for the meal penalties, and then what happens is you then pay them their rate. But it's not only just their rate, it's their prevailing rate. In other words, their rate at straight time, time and a half, or double time. So let me go ahead and I'm going to take this meal penalty here on Wednesday. I'm going to take it pretty far out just so we can see that. We have a lot of meal penalties there. All right, perfect. So now we have that. Now we're going to go ahead and switch this over to New York 2 for features. Now what we do is we're going to click this here, and now what happens? See what happens? It calculated the standard 2, but then what happened is because there was 9 beyond the second one, it started calculating their hourly rate every half hour, and obviously this person was at this point in double time, so they got a lot of meal penalties. So that's how you deal with New York meal penalties as well. Just hit Magic Pay, and now you calculate the totals. Now another treat for people who are doing New York meal penalties is we also have last man in. So last man in is usually known as variable meal penalty, or it's also a way of avoiding a 15-minute period. So in other words, if lunch is a half an hour, actually it becomes a 45-minute span. They get paid for the 15 minutes, but you can avoid a meal penalty because of the last man in. It's literally the last man that gets in the chow line. So yes, put that time in for you New York people, and you will now be able to use that variable half-hour lunch that becomes 45, or the 1-hour lunch that becomes an hour and 15. And that's how you deal with meal penalties in Showbiz Crew Cards. Thank you.